warm welcome to today's panel discussion to mark Mental Health Awareness Week 2021, brought to you by Thrive London, the citywide movement to improve mental health and well-being of all Londoners. So during the next hour, we'll be exploring the mental health and well-being benefits of connecting with nature, particularly looking at how we have engaged with green urban spaces during the pandemic, as well as discussing some of the barriers and challenges faced in accessing these important spaces. We'll also be exploring what we can collectively do to overcome these issues. So I'm really excited to be chairing this discussion. My name is Dr. Helen Fisher, and I'm a reader in developmental psychopathology at the ESRC Centre for Society and Mental Health at King's College London. And I'm joined today by a really fantastic panel who I know will make this a really rich conversation. So we'll start by getting them to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit more about who they are. So I'll start just to hand over to you, Laura.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me on. My name is Laura McMahon. I'm the Community Learning Officer for the Royal Parks in London. The Royal Parks is a charity that supports the 8 Royal Parks in London, which is 5,000 acres of historic green spaces that's open and free for everybody. So my role is about engaging people with the nature and heritage of our parks, and really an emphasis on using that as a way to improve people's well-being through physical and mental health. So part of my role is kind of 2 parts. I have my public facing side, where I do a lot of walking tours in our park. We do a lot of events, family days, we do forest school sessions. And then I have a kind of another side, which is working directly with our local communities who maybe face barriers to engaging with nature. So I work co-creatively with them, kind of designing bespoke programs to enable them to engage with nature.
Most welcome, lovely to have you here and really enjoying your Hyde Park background there.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll pass on to John.
Thanks very much, Helen, and thanks very much for inviting me. My name's John Thorne. I'm the project manager for a project called the Camden and Islington Council's Parks for Health project. This has been funded by the Future Parks Accelerator, which has been set up by the National Ossuary Heritage Fund and also by the National Trust. And we also have funding from the GLA. This is one of 8 projects across the country, and it's the only one in London, and it's the only one that is solely about health. So what we want to do in our project is to make health to run through everything that we do in our park services in Camden and Islington councils. And so all aspects of our work will now have a health focus. And the project is about putting in place the plans to actually do that, which can then be taken forward once the project ends in March of next year. So health will be absolutely central to our work, and we will be part of the health agenda. And in doing that, we also want to share what we're doing, our learning, with others, whoever it may be it people here now, people who may be watching this now, and organisations and parks teams across the country. Thank you.
Thank you. We're looking forward to hearing more from you throughout the discussion. Thank you for coming along. Great. McMahon.
Hi there, I'm Nemini. I'm the manager of Core Landscapes Community Garden and Plant Nursery based in Homerton, Hackney. And Core Landscapes is part of Core Arts, which is a large mental health charity. It's been around for nearly 30 years. And Core Arts works across the arts, sports and horticulture to promote positive mental health and aid recovery from mental health conditions. So I work with people that have been referred to me through Core Arts, but I also work with the wider community as well, with community volunteer programs, and as well with the general public and the community, the corporate sector. And the main purpose of Core Landscapes is to give people the opportunities to engage with gardening, horticultural skills, and the wider natural environment, to promote positive mental health and to give people lifelong learning skills. So wherever they are, whether they're with us or in their own environment, they've got those skills they can have for the rest of their lives to help improve their mental health and keep their mental health really buoyant.
Fantastic. Well, very warm welcome to you as well, and very much enjoying those plants in the background, making us feel very much in nature while in office, which is great. And finally, but definitely not last at all, Bhavin.
Hello, thank you for having me on today. So I work for a small charity in the borough of Hounslow in West London, Hounslow Action for Youth, and I manage a project called the Youth Bonds Project. We work with young people between the ages of 8 and 12 who are referred to our service, who have been identified to need a little bit of extra support, possibly for many different reasons. We run a youth club where we provide 5 days of activities for the young people. Part of those activities are accessing our allotment site where we provide the art ecotherapy. We also look at providing family activities. So we have a holistic approach where families are invited in to take part in the sessions. They can range from sports days in the local parks to Easter egg hunts, scavenger hunts, and anything else that gets the young people and their families out into the community. The young people that we work with attend the service because they're identified as needing a little bit of extra support, be it that they've been classed as vulnerable or may have faced some early childhood trauma and really need that space and time to be able to express themselves and have access to areas where they can get out, let off some energy, and really get in touch with nature. So we've been around for a long time. I personally have been running the project for 10 years, and it's a fantastic project that really allows young people to access services that living in inner city London, they probably wouldn't have access to so much outdoor space or the ability to actually access these services. So yeah, that's us.
Great, sounds amazing. It's wonderful work that all of you are doing, but that just sounds particularly valuable for so many vulnerable people and people kind of disadvantaged, that really important to support in these times particularly. Great, so welcome everyone, lovely to have you here. So we'll get started with our discussion. So I guess what I wanted to think about first was that we know how important access to green space and being outdoors has been for many Londoners and people around the country throughout the pandemic. And I wondered, from your perspectives, what you consider are the main benefits for people's mental health and well-being of being able to access the green spaces in London and spend time in nature. So I don't know, John, do you want to?
Yeah, thanks, Helen. Yeah, a really good question. I mean, without a doubt, what we've seen, and I'm sure this is true across London and indeed across the country, is that there's been a huge uptake of people visiting parks and revisiting parks, because it's been a great place to be outside in a relatively safe environment, and it's not a place where you have to wear a mask or any stipulations, social stipulations like that. And so what we've and then obviously this has been very good for people's mental health, because we know that being in parks and being in nature generally is good for your mental health. And so we're just having those increased numbers of people has been collectively just good for people's mental health. We trialled a particular pilot last autumn, actually, as part of our project, which is, we called it a green social prescribing pilot for referral by GPs and also social prescribing organisations, which we trialled in 2 of our parks, Caledonian Park and Islington Talaka Gardens in Camden. And that pilot, we offered a whole load of activities to people that people could do, that they could try, be it in regard to meditation or yoga or gardening or doing a health walk. And we got really, in the circumstances, I mean, it has to be said, don't try a pilot in a lockdown when you have to restrict numbers. We had the rule of 6 in play at that time, instead of encouraging as many people to end as possible. Nevertheless, we had really good attendance, and also what we had was very positive feedback, both from the referrers and most important from the actual people who attended the sessions, to say how much it actually benefited their mental health. And obviously we want to build that in the coming months and years with our project. So yeah, been very positive indeed.
What do people think? What are the benefits that the people you've been engaging with have found?
I think one of the key things with the work that we do is encouraging people just to stop and to slow down and to look. And whether that's in a sort of facilitated community gardening setting or whether it's just walking through a green space, I think this is the key to being able to start getting a hold of what's going on in your head, if you can actually give your mind a minute just to put everything aside and just focus on what is directly in front of you. And I think gardening and nature is an absolute gem for that. It's so easy and quick to access. And when you're feeling stressed, you can just go out, you can sit in your own garden, you can go for a walk in the park, even walking down the street and just noticing the nature around you. It can have an almost instant effect. And I think being able to encourage people to do that is probably one of the most important things that you can do in life, to have that at your fingertips. And so the work that we do at Core Landscapes is very much focused on that at its heart. And it's almost like unlocking a door. And when you realise how simple it is, it's like the world's your oyster, and it's all there for the taking. And then if you add on to that knowledge and skills to actually get even more from that, so you can start identifying things, you can start noticing the birds, you can start noticing the butterflies, you can start noticing the wildflowers. It just builds layer and layer and layer, and is a fantastic way of sort of pulling people into the natural world. And then on top of that, if you add in empowering people to actually make a positive improvement to their local environment, and for people to realise that even on an individual level, everyone has got some control over improving the environment and helping with climate change mitigation, that adds another whole level on empowerment and confidence and improving self-esteem, as well as adding in the social connection, doing that with other people. It's a huge empowering thing to be able to do.
I think on what Nemini said there, I think as a few of us have talked about ecotherapy, that model is just so important, and we've probably been all doing it for years, that model of connecting with nature for well-being. And I think if you think of those 5 pillars of well-being, what is it? Take notice, connect, learn, give back. I've forgotten the 5th. Does anyone know? You know, when you think about those 5 ways of well-being, a natural space is just perfect for that. You know, when you're going out for a walk, you are able to hopefully connect, especially in lockdown. It was the only real opportunity you had to connect with somebody outside of your households. You're able to take notice of the environment around you. You were able to learn, as Nemini was saying, you know, we did a podcast during lockdown on the dawn chorus and how to identify birds. And it was our most popular podcast, I think, because people at this stage were just getting outside. They were noticing the birds singing and weren't really aware of what was happening, and just learning a bit about what the dawn chorus is and why birds are singing and how to identify a few birds. You know, that was just so important. And I think the natural space is just a great environment to be able to improve your well-being. We know the stats show, and we've got so many reports showing now, that being out in nature physically reduces your blood pressure, it makes you feel less anxious. I think lockdown has made everybody really appreciate their green spaces.
Definitely been a focal point, hasn't it, I think, as you say, for so many people, particularly because there wasn't much else we were allowed to do. I wonder, what you think. What do you think there have been some social benefits as well to people spending time outdoors?
So looking at it from the point of view of the young people that we work with, I think that limited space, you know, a lot of families are living in flats because of the areas that they're living in. There's not a lot of garden space. Actually being outside in a park or in a big area allows the children to let off steam, allows them to run around, allows them to be free, and actually allows them to get in touch with their surroundings. And we ran an interesting activity over the lockdown. We've done this before, but I think it was more effective during lockdown, where we had the children out, be it in their gardens or the park for their hour of exercise. And they had their little clipboards, and they were ticking off certain things that they were seeing around them, and they had to look at things that they could touch, they could hear, they could feel, they could see, they could smell. And it was really interesting, actually, because when we've done these activities with the children before, I felt that they haven't been as in touch with their surroundings as they were when they were so limited that they couldn't see all of this stuff. So I think looking at it from a point of view of young people, especially during lockdown, I think it's given them that sense of freedom. it's given them the sense of accelerating their learning, because, you know, some children are learning about nature, they're learning about photosynthesis, they're learning about lots of different things, and they're actually going out and they're saying, wow, I saw these plants and I saw these different leaves, and, you know, I saw all these different things that they were recording and sending in pictures of. And I felt that it was so much more important during lockdown, and so much more beneficial during lockdown, to actually allow these children to access these spaces. And I feel that they really benefited from being outdoors, and it really improved family relationships, because families were allowed to, or able to, go out and do these activities together, because they weren't able to see anybody else. And, you know, before lockdown, I think children do struggle sometimes with their learning, sometimes being indoors. When you're finding something difficult, it's already difficult enough. They're packed into small classrooms, you know, teachers are limited with services that they can provide for them. So actually, when they're outside, they're feeling so free, they're feeling able to learn in a way that maybe we weren't able to do when we were younger. So I think the benefits are just endless. And Laura, as you said, that there's so much research out there to show actually how this does benefit young people. And I feel that if it's just not on a mental health basis, but on their physical health as well. Mm-hmm. You know, getting them out, running around, it's allowing them to let off that energy that they may not be able to, that may come out in different ways at home, in aggression, in frustration, in depression. So I think for me, the benefits are just endless.
Fantastic, thank you. So many different advantages and benefits, as you say, that ability to let off steam, that ability to stop and think and have that space to breathe. And I think particularly during the past year, a sense of freedom as well, and being able to get out and away from restrictions and people, and breathe that fresh air as well, as being so incredibly important for people. And I wondered, some of you touched on things you've been doing to kind of encourage people to use these spaces. I wonder if anyone wants to say a bit more about specific activities they've been doing to really get people to make the most of these spaces.
So if I may start. So yes, so just to say a bit more about the pilots I'd referred to earlier that we did last autumn. So we had activities. It's really interesting, just linking into activities we've just heard described. So for example, we have a health walk, which was very popular. Walking is great because almost all of us can do walking. It's the easiest form of exercise to do, and that was really popular. And I'm really keen that we do more health walks. You start in a park. We all know, but people don't necessarily know generally how much there is in a park to see, because parks have a history to them. They have features, they have the places of interest of them. So to bring that to life, and obviously they have trees and flowers that people can talk about. Gardening, as obviously we've heard, is something that we did as well. Again, that was popular. Gardening obviously is great for the reasons already been said. It brings people together. It's something creative. It's contributing something to the park. So we did activities such as that. We did Tai Chi, yoga. We also did sort of meditation. So obviously taking account of the environment you're in, as Nemani was talking about, just stopping and just observing the environment around you. And so yeah, they were popular, and we're keen to do more of that, quite simply because, as I say, it's pilot activity, and so it was just to learn from that and to take it forward. So yeah, there's great opportunities. Obviously, lockdown, as we all know, don't need to dwell on, has been an awful thing, but actually it has thrown up great opportunities as well.
I wondered, Laura, in the rural parks, are there particular activities you've been doing to encourage people, maybe even via online means?
Yeah, so I mean, pre-lockdown and just before lockdown, we actually were about to launch quite a few very exciting projects that I'd been working on for a full year. So just before lockdown, I was doing a few different projects. So one was a kind of social and therapeutic horticulture program, working with young people out of mainstream education. And we used our garden, Kensington Gardens. It was a 6-week program to give them employability skills, but also, as we know, going into the garden really improved their social skills. A lot of the students had autism, had learning disabilities, so built up their social skills, it built up their cognition, their strength, but also their mental health massively as well. So that was a project we've been running for quite a while. Another project that we had just about to start and lockdown happened was a project called Resonate Parks, which was working with a dementia charity, so people living with dementia, and we were going to bring a cohort of people living with dementia and their carers into the park, into Hyde Park specifically, go around and do art in relation to the natural environment that they were in, and that would culminate in a resource that would be used for other people living with dementia to access our park. So unfortunately we had to put pause to that. We also, I've been running forest school sessions and was working specifically with SEND schools, so special educational needs and disability schools. And I think it was Bhavani who was talking earlier about, you know, the importance of getting kids outside, and especially in a learning environment. If you have work with kids with special educational needs, a lot of times they have very different needs that need to be catered for at the same time. And I mean, an outdoor space is so perfect for that. So you'd have some kids that just wanted to run around and burn out energy, and you'd have some kids that just wanted to sit there. I had one child who loved snapping dried pasta. That was his kind of stem. When he was getting a bit stressed, he would just snap dry pasta in his mouth, and we just started picking up some sticks and snapping them beside him, and this led to him really engaging with the session. He would find sticks, and some would snap and some would bend, and we'd try and figure out which branch would link to which tree, and it was just such a fantastic project to work with those kids before lockdown. But absolutely, when lockdown happened, we had to massively change the way that we worked. So we set up a monthly podcast series where we kind of unearthed the secrets of our parks and engaging people with the parks throughout lockdown, which got great numbers of people viewing and listening. We did lots of online talks, so that's why my background is like this. I did an online talk last night on Hyde Park, and that was great. We did it as a replacement for a walking tour, but actually we realised we were engaging people from all over the world who were tuning in to learn about the parks, which was fantastic. And we started doing our normally discovery days that we would do in our parks for families during holiday times. We had to move that completely online, and trying to keep the joy of being in nature by doing something virtually really, you know, threw up lots of challenges, but it was very successful. We just really wanted to make sure that we could give resources to people to be able to engage with nature, even if it's in their balcony or in their garden or if their local green space.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it, that opportunity? And I think so many people have viewed other natural spaces around the world and listened to bird song and all sorts of other things, haven't they, that maybe they can't access for various reasons, due to travel restrictions or due to physical, personal restrictions or locational restrictions. So it's amazing how you've been able to open those things up. I wondered if, in your anemone, if you wanted to add anything else about activities you have been doing to engage people.
Yeah, we got some funding from the Grow Back Greener Fund for the Mayor of London. So since January, we've been doing that, which has included taking on the street that our project is sitting on and the local green space, which is Homerton Grove, which is directly in front of Homerton Hospital. So we started off by doing quite a lot of consultation with the park users as to what they felt about the existing space. It's quite an underused space. There's not a lot of other green spaces nearby. So it was interesting to find out why that space wasn't being particularly well used. And it's regarding, largely regarding safety, how safe people felt using the space, but also what space was lacking. And it was really interesting because almost everybody said they wanted to see flowers and how flowers would make the space feel more loved, and fruit trees. So we've put in an orchard, we put in a community orchard with a real eclectic mixture of fruit trees, different varieties, different sizes. And we've installed a 50-metre long perennial meadow along the edge of the space that joins the street. So as you're walking down the street, you'll be able to see all the flowers. And we've also planted up 7 tree pits along Wardle Street, and we're installing some new street planters. And what this has done to that local space is to get people to notice what's happening. And a lot of people walking by, a lot of people that come into our project really say how much they appreciate the time and the effort and care that has gone into greening that space. It's a really, really polluted area. It's a massive bus route coming out from the hospital. There's huge tailbacks of traffic. So as you're walking down the street, you know, you can hear the traffic. You know you're breathing in huge lungfuls of nitrous oxide. So it's really not a very nice neighbourhood. But the difference, putting in some meadow flowers, putting in the orchard, really transforms the space. And by doing this, you're pulling people into the work that you're doing. So you're not only working with the people directly, you know, during the physical sessions, but all that wider impact of getting people to notice what's going on. And it's all hanging on growing back greener. So coming out of lockdown with a new vigour to try and combat climate change collectively, and how actually that's a very easy thing to do from a grassroots level, because you've got the buy-in. People want to make their local neighbourhoods nicer. And I think if you're starting off by asking people what it is that they want, what changes that they want to see, you've got that buy-in right from the get-go. And then obviously the next thing you've really got to think about is long-term maintenance. Who's going to water these plants weekly, bi-weekly, even every day during the heat of the summer to get everything established? So again, it's like having that the facilitated coordination to be able to keep that going long term, because that's often, I think, the harder part. The easy bit is making it look pretty at the beginning. The hardest part is keeping everything growing long term. But I feel very, very confident that we're going to be able to keep this all looking fantastic over this year. And I think hopefully it's just the start of something even better with Homerton Grove, and we'll, over the next few years, hopefully we'll be able to put more and more plants and shrubs and flowers, so there's a real mixture of different things growing there.
And that maintenance, I think, is a really great opportunity, isn't it, to think about how you can harness what's happening in that community. Can you bring different parts of that community together to care for it and have something central to really work on together?
Yeah, and I think it's about having different pathways of engagement. So whoever you are, whether you're literally somebody just walking through the space, or whether you're somebody that's been coming to my sessions for a long period of time, that everybody has got a way into it, and can get from it what they want to get from it. You know, you're not enforcing one way of engagement, but you know, you're really creating lots of different pathways in.
Great opportunities. I wonder, Pavini, if you wanted to say a bit more about ways that you've managed to engage younger people and different types of people in.
So our Let's Grow Together project was extremely successful over lockdown, and it took many different forms from children. So we ran the sessions via Zoom because we weren't running at the youth club, but the idea was to get the children out. So I would speak to them and say, right, this is what we're going to do, and then we'd follow them out into the garden with their cameras, and they'd go and do the bits that they were doing. So it was such a successful project. The kids planted flowers, vegetables in the first half of the project. We then, once realised the lockdown was actually going to continue for a lot longer, we started the second part of the project, which really allowed the children to look at their mental health. So for example, it was very difficult for us because firstly, to try and engage children, especially children with additional needs via Zoom is difficult in itself. So, you know, we had to really get creative with how we were going to do this. So the children were making potions and making cakes and, you know, writing their feelings on their cakes and their icing. So they looked forward to being able to eat them at the end. Sorry, their biscuits, looked forward to eating them at the end. We really had to get creative with the way that we were working with the children, you know, and for example, the potions that they created were from things that they found in their gardens or out and about, stones, leaves, twigs, you know, bits of mud, whatever it was that they were finding. And actually they had to name their ingredients. So they were making their potions, you know, this is my ingredients for wanting more self-esteem, right? I'm going to put this in my potion. And the idea was that they then look at that potion every day and think, right, the pebble represents me wanting more confidence. And you know, really trying to get them to not just do the activity, but for that to have a long-lasting effect for them, and support them through the lockdown. And actually we had some really, really positive feedback from parents that the projects were really successful, and the children were really engaged and really wanted to go out and do more. And I think for our children, it was very important because a lot of our families live in flats. So actually getting out to do the activities was a challenge in itself. So there's not very many big parks and areas, green spaces where we live. So actually it was really nice to see how they were getting creative with exploring their area. And I think that one of the big things for us was that families found green areas that they didn't even know existed within their area. And actually, I know I did that myself as well. I think I know every park within a 5-mile radius of my house now, or every green space. So I think that was really positive. And the children surprisingly engaged very well. They were really looking forward to their sessions. And actually, it was really important for us to get the families involved. So actually, the activities were for the children, which ended up being family activities. And it was really nice for us to see the photos that the parents were sending in of the activities that the children were doing. We were doing things online, you know, whole sessions online where I'd send out equipment to the young people and allow them to do that. We did things like mindfulness colouring. We had mindfulness bingo. You know, we had lots of things going on for the children. And I think the idea was really to just get them, even if it was just them taking the Zoom session outside, you know, where the weather's nice, let's all get outside. Even I would sit in the garden, let's get outside, let's sit outside and draw. You know, we put some music on and we draw. And you know, there didn't have to be any pressure on what we were drawing or what we were doing. It was just that the kids were sitting outside and being able to get some fresh air and actually take in some sun and just be outside. So, you know, there was various different things that we did within that project, but that was kind of the main idea of it, and looking at their self-esteem, their self-confidence, their mental health and emotional well-being, you know, their physical health, and actually just getting them to have some fun in the difficult times that we were in. And socializing with the staff and the other children was actually key on helping those children get through some of the difficult times that they were getting through, because they were extremely isolated. So I think the key to it was actually getting them connected with each other and actually being able to access our service and have one-to-ones with us and really have as much of the service running as we could, obviously, you know, in the limited resources that we had.
Absolutely. And I think you picked up on a really important point there, which is, we know, and we've already talked about the amazing benefits of being outside, but actually for some people it is incredibly difficult to do that, isn't it? As you say, often people might be in areas where they haven't got access to a garden. That's very common in London, not to have that opportunity yourself. Particularly in the very beginning of the original lockdown, people weren't allowed to sit and be in green spaces where thankfully that's not come back at any point, but it was really restricted for some people. Other people may have to travel on the tube or a bus or something else to get to a green space because it's further away, or because of physical disabilities, and people may not feel comfortable in current times doing that. And we know that different groups of people access spaces in different ways. And I wondered if anyone else has any thoughts. I mean, just some amazing creative things you've been talking about there, but are there other things that we could do in the way we design spaces or help people engage with them that might break down some of those barriers?
Can I just pick up on something that Abhavani said about people not knowing about the parks or the green spaces near to them? And I think it's a really major thing. We have over 4,000 parks and green spaces in London, which is well over an average of 100 per borough. So chances are that most people, if not everyone in London, lives near a park or a green space. Let's call it a park, because that's what the usual name I think residents might call an area of nature in a city. And I think it's just getting out there that those parks are there, that it might be a big park, we're talking about be a Hyde Park, for example, or wherever it may be, or smaller parks, but there's likely to be a park nearer to you. And chances are that's, you know, obviously obviously there's something to visit there, to see there. There might be activities going there, such as some of the brilliant activities we've just been hearing about. And also, we all know it's good for your mental health to be in a park, but we need to promote that more, that being in a park is good for your health, it's good for your mental health, and can be good for physical health and so on. And we really need to do more as a sector, and this particularly, I say this particularly for councils to really promote more that the parks are there, what's in them, and the health benefits of them. And I think that would be a great first step, or one of a number of things that could be done to get more people into parks and for their mental health to improve.
I just also add it, which is John mentioned there, which is great. I think another really important thing for making people aware of green spaces and getting out is that they feel like it's a space for them. And I've felt that a lot through a lot of the work I've worked with communities over the years, is that sometimes they feel like, especially big parks, aren't spaces for them, that they don't feel welcome, they don't feel it's for them. I had I've been working for years with a group called Dutch Social Club. They're in Maida Vale, really close to Hyde Park. They're over 50s from Afro-Caribbean backgrounds, and they have like a lunch social. I've been bringing them into the park. We do sessions in the park a lot. They love going on the buggies. A lot of them are a bit too old to go out walking, so they go on buggies around the park and they love it. But I had a conversation with one of the women, and she said she'd lived 15-minute walk from Hyde Park pretty much all her life, and she was like, she didn't actually know that this was a space she was allowed into, and that was a reoccurring theme I was hearing from a lot of the groups I was working with, is that they didn't feel it was a space for them. So I think it's so important that we promote these spaces, that people are aware of them, but that they feel it's a space for them. And I think working collectively with groups, I can't remember, was it Bhavani or Nemini who was saying about public consultation is so important, that, you know, you talk about the space, what does that space mean for you, how can we help this be a better space for you, I think is really important as well.
I think as well, leading on from that, I mean, if looking at Homerton Grove is kind of what I'm focusing on, it's quite a small space and it's used in lots of different ways. And when we were doing the consultation, a lot of what we were getting back from people, why it was like a space people were walking through rather than wanting to spend time in. And that was largely to do with the drug taking and the drinking that happens in that space. But obviously the answer isn't to exclude people from the space. So then you're looking at, well, how do you make a space that is a relatively small space work for everybody who wants to use it? And so what we tried to do when we were adding to that space is not take away any space that was already being used in a certain way in other areas of the park, but to really focus on the bit that nobody was using because there weren't any seating there at all. So we were kind of creating a new bit of that space, but we've still got the other areas within that space being used in the way that they are. But I've had some interesting conversations about seating with people, because often when I'm looking at community spaces, I want to put seating in because I want to draw people to the space. But often there's a resilience to that, you know, not people not wanting to have that because they feel it's going to attract drinkers and drug takers. And I think there's something fundamentally skew with that approach to a public green space, because surely the things that we need to be thinking about is helping the people that have got the issues that are driving them to drinking and drug taking in the first place, not just thinking, oh, let's just get rid of all those people because we don't want them here. So I think in an urban community setting, it's quite a complicated set of issues that you're looking at, and you can't just sort of sugarcoat it by making things look pretty and then everything's going to be okay. But you've really got to look at the wider issues that are going on around that space and being really sensitive to that. So with Homerton Grove, what we're hoping to do is to keep it being used in the way that it's being used, but that more people are going to be using it in different ways, so that hopefully it will kind of level out, so that everybody feels that that space is a welcoming space to come to. But I think thinking about safety and viewpoints, being able to see across places, being able to have access routes through a space so people do feel they're safe, and really, yeah, coming back to the consultation, finding out what people want from the space and how people want to use it. Next door to Homerton Grove, there's an adventure playground which is closed off to the general public, but I've been working with the people running that project, and what they were saying was they'd love to have an area in Homerton Grove where the parents could go and sit while the kids are in the adventure playground. At the moment, that isn't happening because the parents don't want to sit in Homerton Grove because it doesn't feel safe. So we're looking at all these different ways of trying to make different areas of that space feel safe for lots of other different people to come and engage with. Can I add another quick point on this while it's in my head? Is that obviously the more people you attract to a relatively small green space, you then do have a real big issue with litter and how that is then being managed. And things like the paths getting wider and the, you know, various things getting trampled on. So I think it's like you have to think about all these things at the same time. If you're wanting a lot more people to use a relatively small space, how that actually impacts on the space. And I've noticed in Hackney, in Clissold Park, with the litter issue, they've brought in the big municipal wheelie bins, but they're landfill bins. They're not recycling bins. So you're kind of exacerbating a problem that we're trying to solve. And again, it's like thinking of all these things at the same time, not just having one approach to it.
Really, it's that joined up thinking, isn't it? Can you bring
absolutely,
from a
and
community
there's a
perspective?
time to be doing that, because people's awareness is so heightened because of the pandemic. So it's a really, really good opportunity to take all these things on when we're looking at our green spaces right now.
And I think it's important as well that people have now been really creative with, because they've been so limited with what they can do. What they could do was just go to a park or an outside space. There wasn't, or go to Tesco or Asda, you know. And the children used to say, Ravini, my day out has been going shopping, you know, and they just got so excited, whereas before they'd hate going to the supermarket. So I think it's people have become more creative with what they can do with their outside spaces. And I think it's really a good time to really zone in on that and really say, right, people are outside, they're willing to be outside because there's not much else they can do. They've become creative with what they can do outside. It's now the time where we can really kind of focus on that, because that's where, you know, that's what they've been doing. And I think it's really important for people to know that outside spaces can be beneficial, they can be fun, they can be used as family time or whatever else it is that you want them to be used for, because let's be honest, that's all we've had in the last year, and people have had to make the most of what they've got. So I think it's a fantastic time to get them out there, you know, get them looking at what is available for them outside, because there is a lot. It's just about, John, I know you said about actually getting them to know that these things are there. They're here, they're ready for you to use, you know, and actually there are so many services that are available, but because sometimes they're not as well advertised, it's difficult for people to actually go in and access these things. I mean, we have youth workers going in, and not from our organisation, but from different organisations, running football sessions in the local football pitches. And because people don't know about them as much, they're not able to access the service as much. So it's about really getting people to know that this is out there, you know, we can be creative with the space that we have, and this is what we can do.
If I could add to that, I think it's, as we were saying, it's about getting the message out there to our residents, but also it's about getting the message out there to people who could refer residents into our parks.
Yes.
And that's a big thing that we've been doing, and I'm sure you have as well, is that we've been talking to GPs, to our local social prescribing organisations and their link workers. We've been talking to voluntary and community organisations as well, other organisations, deliverers of children's centres and other facilities. And actually, a lot of them, haven't really known about parks. Some have, don't get me wrong, some have. But when I've said to them about what parks offer, how many there are, the fact that their unique selling point, that they're free to use, open for long hours, and so on and so forth, is that they've really been engaged with this message. And obviously then, and particularly when you talk about the activities that are on a park. So I'm really keen that we all know about social prescribing, and then to have that, for us, the dimension of it, of course, is green social prescribing to parks and nature. And I'm really keen that we do that, and that this happens not just where we are in Camden and Islington, but elsewhere as well, because it's a great opportunity. As we all, of course, all know how parks are good for your mental well-being. Let's have social prescribers be referring people into parks and those activities to improve their mental well-being. It's a win-win. It's not like a prescription for nature. It's not like one you take to the chemist where you get a drug and it might not be very pleasant to take and it might have side effects. There's nothing negative about this at all. This is all positive, and a prescription that we offer is cheaper than offering one that you get from a chemist as well. So there's a great opportunity here for the communication to be obviously with the public at large, but also with people who can refer activities into park. Social prescribers, as I say, voluntary community sector organisations, relevant parts of the council, many organisations work with people who have a mental health condition, and for them to know about parks and to work and maybe even deliver activities in parks, I think it has got to be such a good thing, and it can only benefit.
Absolutely, but I do think it's important to have that balance, isn't it? I think you want to really encourage people, but I think before you go too far down that road, I think you need to make sure that people do feel comfortable in that space. They need to know it's there, they need to know that they can access it. But as Moni was saying earlier, sometimes people don't feel comfortable in that space, and it could be negative actually if you go in there and you feel frightened or you feel uncomfortable, and it's going to be really important to, as you were saying, to think about the design and how you do that. Yes, please.
I just wanted to sort of follow on from both those points really, regarding the social prescribing model, which is great, but as somebody who's worked in the voluntary and community sector for nearly 10 years, my issue with social prescribing is where is the funding? Because if people are getting prescribed to community voluntary sector organisations and there's no funding attached to that, it's the assumption that the facilitation of these sessions is somehow free. And obviously the people that work in the project, that's time, that's facilitated time that needs to be covered from somewhere, whether it's via NHS contracts or whether from grant funding. So I just wanted to flag that up, that social prescribing isn't free. And it's very necessary to have facilitated pathways in because of the safety aspect. So if you remove that facilitation, you are by default excluding people. So the two things do go hand in hand.
I do think that's incredibly important, I think, from the safety issue, but also from the fact that some people are going to find it more difficult to engage on their own in the parks.
Exactly.
We were talking a lot about that earlier, that actually, for some work you've been doing with children with special educational needs, that actually the work you were able to do to help them engage with the space that they might not naturally feel able to, sounds like it was incredibly important to do. So yeah,
and that can be, you may not need that many facilitated sessions. It may just be just to get over that initial obstacle of feeling that you're not welcome in a certain space, when of course everybody is, but just to get in through that doorway and maybe make local connections with other people, so that people can then meet other people outside of the workshops that we're doing and access the green space together in that way.
And I think it does sound like it is thinking about all the different aspects and all the different types of people in our communities and what works, doesn't it really? To really kind of consider that and step back and think about that and think about different things. And I was also thinking, for people that feel normally quite comfortable in parks, there are also different times of the day. I was thinking about really horrendous recent events in one of the parks in London, and actually that shouldn't have happened, and it was at night, and people can feel unsafe at different points in the day as well, and just seeing that actually some of the things that relatively simple things like putting extra lights in a park or doing other things could actually make such a big difference to people. So I do think that's important to think about, that joined up thinking, that real consultation with people, I think is important. We've got about 10 minutes left, so a couple of things I wanted to pick up on, and we'll see if there are other things people want to talk a bit more about. But I just wanted to come back to something you were saying earlier, Emily, about what this actually might mean for people going forwards, and how we could actually harness our communities and bring them together, perhaps to make a difference to our environment, both locally but actually kind of broadly. It is after, it is the pandemic, I guess, or the epidemic has been going on for a long time in the background, the issue of climate change that we kind of engage with sometimes and then sometimes conveniently forget. But it does sound like that's a way to make change, potentially from grassroots. And I was thinking particularly about the issue of pollution you were talking about. We know that pollution has huge effects on people's physical health and more recently on their mental health as well. And that we have to wait for policies and things to change traffic and all sorts of other things. But it does sound like, if you can actually get people to create more green spaces and perhaps have more trees or other things that can buffer some of those effects, that could make a difference. I wonder if there are other things that we could do in that space.
So just to kind of respond to that particular thing, I think from policymakers and funders and governments is to really value the impact of the kind of work that we all do here, that actually for a very small amount of money, the impact of having one person in any one of our roles is massive. We're impacting 10, hundreds, thousands of people from one role. So I think acknowledging that you actually need to invest a relatively small amount of money into the community and voluntary sector to have a massive impact is actually a much better way of investing that money than some of the top-down systems that can be put in place. Like if you take a green space and you get an external landscaping company to come in and make it look gorgeous, it can cost hundreds of thousands of pounds. Whereas if you invest that money into your local 10 grassroots organisations, you'd actually get far, far more for your money. So that's kind of one thing that I'd like to bang my little drum about.
Absolutely. On that theme, I wonder if there are other things that people think, looking forwards now, what can we do to invest in these spaces more, or get people to engage in them more and kind of sustain that over time? What do other people think?
Can I just add to something that Nemini was saying about making that case for investment? Something we have put together is we called a business case for our parks, and that's basing the business case around health and about the health benefits that we all know and have been talking about. And what that already has been successful in doing is actually protecting funding for our councils, or one of our councils. And that's been really important to do, because obviously council budgets, like everyone's budgets, are always under threat. And actually to be using the health agenda in a positive way to say those benefits that we've been saying, and Nemini was just outlining just now, is actually a really good way to protect and maybe even attract funding as well, because of all those benefits that there are. You know, £1 of investment gives you £6 of return. So it's like it makes real sense to do it. So it's to me, it's another argument from a council perspective, which obviously is my perspective, putting health at the heart of what you do is a really effective way to, not just for your residents, but also to protect and secure funding as well.
And actually, can I sort of, with the sort of council and grassroots partnership thing, and also the corporate sector, I mean, our plans for Homerton Grove is to harness the relationship that we've got with the Parks people, Hackney Parks people specifically with Homerton Grove, but also any other local organisations, local businesses, in that area. So there's a local landscape company that you know, that three-way partnership could attract some funding, you know, more funding to develop Homerton Grove. And I think going forward, I think that the Parks Department, the councils and the community sector, we do need to really work hand in hand and use both of our assets combined, and the information that we know, with the Parks people, the long-term maintenance, the logistics of that, combined with the community sector and the engagement and volunteer engagement. And, you know, it's a really, really good partnership. And I think depending on which borough you're in and which council you're working with, you may be, you know, that relationship may come very easily, or it may be quite obstructed. So I think from a council perspective, again, to really value the benefits of utilising the grassroots organisations, I think that's where the future has to be.
Absolutely.
I think as well, when we're thinking about going forward, we're always looking at that kind of sustainable model, and we have to always remember sustainability is a three-pronged approach. It has to have environment, society, and, you know, economy in it connected together. And I think Emily raised that really good when you're talking about working with local businesses. But I think it's sometimes as well, when we talk about the environment, or we talk about people's access to nature, they can kind of be seen as two different things, but really they're so connected.
Absolutely.
We need to have green spaces for people, and people need to be there to help our green spaces and these spaces for the future. I know a big thing that we've been working on, we've got our biodiversity strategy that we're working on for our parks, looking at the sustainability of our green spaces, and really we need to connect with the people aspect of our park as well. They can't just be in silos. A big project we've been doing over the lockdown was working with young people. So we work with Access Aspiration. They work with young children, young people from disadvantaged backgrounds in London to gain meaningful work experience. And we've worked with them for years, but during lockdown, all of the work experience opportunities had ended because, you know, restrictions. So we created a virtual work experience for some students to come in And we were really working with them to see how could they help us engage with young people to improve these green spaces, to keep these green spaces open for everybody. And the amazing ideas that were coming from these young people. We're thinking about having a TikTok account, which sounds great to me. And they were coming up with absolutely fantastic ideas. So I think harnessing young people who are such huge advocates for the environment, I think is really important too.
And just touching on that, Laura, I think it's really important, as you said, we have to get the community involved in this. What do they want? When we spoke to the parents, what do you want? We want to be able to okay, let's do this. They were so much more willing to engage when it was what they wanted to do. And actually, because it's their space, they will have some fantastic creative ideas on what they want to do, how they can do it. And actually, if they're invested in it, then they're more likely to say to their friends, why don't you come along and we'll do this and we can do this. And it works, definitely getting the community, the young people. The young people are our next generation. So actually getting them involved and getting them to understand the importance of what we're doing is vital, because they are the ones that are going to be bringing it forward. And there's a worry that, there might not be so much of an emphasis on it, and we know the way the stuff's going with the environment at the moment and stuff. So it's really important to educate the children and really get them to get on board with this, but also to get families, parents, the community involved in what it is what do you want to go on in your local areas, and what should we do together. So yeah.
Sorry, go on.
Sorry, I just wanted to sort of bring up the horticultural sector and the fact that there is a shortage of people coming up into the industries, into the horticultural industry, and absolutely getting the young people involved to passionately love the environment and plants and nature and trees and biodiversity and all the rest of it is absolutely fundamental for the future of the planet.
And can I just make a point on that as well, especially with horticulture, is as well about bringing in young people into this industry and bringing young people from diverse backgrounds in as well. We know the horticulture industry and the environmental industry can predominantly be very white middle class, and we need to massively open it up to everybody to get different points of views, and to get more energy into the sector. I've worked with, I just did a podcast there this month with Grow to Know. They're a community grassroots organisation in North Kensington that use gardening to heal the local community that have been affected by Grenfell, and massively to encourage people from diverse backgrounds to get into horticulture. And the guy, Tayshan, who set it up, he's 21 years old, was a footballer, and after Grenfell just started doing some gardening for his own mental health. Never did gardening before, didn't feel it was a space for him, and now is designing a garden for the Chelsea Flower Show celebrating Black culture in West London. So I think there's some really exciting things happening, and these can be definitely the future.
Something that's come up for us is that two activities stand above all others as a great way to engage people to improve their mental health. One is health walks, and the other one is gardening. And it just comes up so strongly from all the consultation we do. Talking to the local mental health trusts, NHS Mental Health Trust, they've said gardening and health walks, put that on, and we'll support that. They're great activities, easy to do. We've, as Bhavani and we've all said about many people don't have access to garden, so why not have your garden be your local park? Those are the two top activities. There's many others, of course, but they stand head and shoulders. So I think it's a great way to really improve people's mental health in parks.
Fabulous. So I'm going to draw it to a close there, and I think these are great places to finish, really thinking about how we can bring everyone in the community together, really listen to them and get them engaged, if not necessarily in horticulture, but even just in something that's in nature, and really get them to engage with that and reap the benefits of being in those outdoor spaces and thinking about how those are inclusive for absolutely everybody. So that's fantastic. So just leaves me to say thank you so much to all of the panel members today who've done a fabulous job of telling us about the benefits and how they're helping to ensure that all of the community is really getting the most out of those amazing green spaces. So thank you ever so much for joining us today and sharing all the amazing work that you're doing, and I hope it continues and that people continue to use those spaces going forwards, and we can make them even more wonderful. So just thank you to you, and thank you to Thrive London for putting on this discussion on the benefits of nature and mental health and well-being during Mental Health Awareness Week. And as we know, Thrive London is a citywide movement to improve the mental health and well-being of Londoners, and they're really keen to increase the use of these outdoor spaces in London going forward. So thank you so much. It's been great to speak to you today, and I wish you a great rest of the Mental Health Awareness Week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.